Thanks for coming, everybody. We're making an effort to be at least sort of on time, he said, looking at the clock that said 5 past 10. For those of you that know, I'm Jim Henson. I direct the Texas Politics Project at UT, and I am very happy to very briefly introduce you to our event today. We'll have another panel at 2 o'clock in which I'll be sitting with a bunch of crack reporters, some from the Tribune and some from other news outlets in the state. But for now, what I want to do is thank you all for coming again, introduce you to our co-partner and co-producer of this event, who you all know, our friends at the Texas Tribune, and hand it to my friend Evan Smith.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. As you all know, this is post-election debrief week, which is kind of like Shark Week, except the more arrogant. We all will now tell you everything that we didn't know before the election that we suddenly know brilliantly after the election. And more importantly, we'll tell you what we're going to do, what's going to happen going forward. It is really an opportunity to look back on the election results of Tuesday, which are fresh, but I think in the case of this panel especially, more importantly, do a forward rotation or two ahead to what the implications of the results are for the legislative session and for politics and policy in Texas going forward. We know the numbers. The numbers are that the Republicans won a net of 22 seats on Tuesday in the Texas House, putting them at 99 for now. With respect to my colleague, my friend, Ms. Howard there. We are at 99 for now of the Republicans and 51 of the Democrats. It is a high watermark for the Republicans in the Texas House. At the apex of the Craddock era, as Speaker, there were 88 Republicans in the majority. And so 99 is a lot. 99 can do a lot of things that 91 can't do, and that 81 can't do, and that 77 can't do. And so one of the interesting things I hope we'll talk about here today is, what does 99 mean, actually, from a policy standpoint, leaving aside the politics of it from a policy standpoint. Beyond that, we knew going into this session, no matter what the outcome of the elections were on Tuesday, we knew that the shortfall, we knew that redistricting, and we knew that to a lesser degree immigration were going to be the three things that would consume not only people in the House, but people in the Senate. And one of the interesting questions of what 99 means, one of the extensions of that is, what else now is on the table from a policy standpoint that might not have been on the table from a policy standpoint had the number been 89 or 79 or 77. So let me introduce our panel. We're going to have a good, robust discussion for about 45 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Remember that this is being videotaped, and so invariably if you ask a question, you and your voice will be, and your question will be out for the world to see. We are honored to have 4 distinguished people on the panel with us. It could have been a panel of 40. We chose these 4 deliberately because we think they can provide the insight and the context and the personal experience with the process on the political and policy side that we need for a program like this. To my left is the Honorable Arlene Wolgemuth, who is Executive Director of the Texas Public Policy Foundation and Director of its Center for Healthcare Policy. For 10 years, from 1995 to 2005, Ms. Wolgemuth represented District 58, including her hometown of Burleson, in the Texas House of Representatives. She has the distinction of having appeared twice on Texas Monthly's 10 Best Legislators list in 2001 and 2003, and I'm sorry to say also on the 10 Worst list 2 times. In 1997 and 1999, Burka giveth and Burka taketh, as the rules say.
And I hold the distinction of the only person named as the worst of the worst.
You were the, well, I was kind enough not to bring that up, but since you brought it up, there we are. Today, and as ever, to Ms. Wolgemuth's left is the Honorable Pete Laney, who represented 1st District 76 and then District 85 in the Texas House, including his hometown of Hale Center, for a total of 34 years, from 1973 to 2007. And he was Speaker of the House for 10 of those years, from 1993 to 2003, a record tenure in that post, matched only by that of his predecessor, Gib Lewis. Speaker Laney appeared on Texas Monthly's 10 Best list following the 1993 session. To Speaker Laney's left is Corbin Castile, who this week is the cat who ate the canary. A partner in Castile, Irwin & Associates, a political consulting and corporate affairs firm formed just this year. He counts among his client victories this cycle not only the cakewalk elections of Eva Guzman to the Texas Supreme Court and David Porter to the Texas Railroad Commission, but the considerably more challenging re-election of Linda Harper Brown to the Texas House from Irving, and what were 2 of the real headlines on Tuesday, the elections of Jason Isaacs and Rodney Anderson to the Texas House. And neither of those races was at the beginning of the cycle necessarily considered to be competitive, and Corbyn, to his credit, deserves, as the consultant in those races, a tip of the hat for a good Tuesday. To Corbyn's left is Jim Dow, who this week is the canary. As executive director of the Texas 2020 PAC, an organization that self-describes as preserving the centrist core of the Texas House by promoting the politics and political careers and policies of independent, business-minded Democrats, of whom, after Tuesday, there are many fewer. 5 of the 9 Texas 2020 members listed on their website were defeated on Tuesday. A 6th did not run for re-election, and a 7th has a 15-vote lead as of today that will possibly go to a recount. We welcome our panelists, Ms. Wolgemuth, Mr. Laney, Mr. Castile, and Mr. Dow. Let me ask each of you, beginning with Ms. Wolgemuth, to talk about Tuesday in the context of not the politics so much as the message. What did we take away in terms of where Texas is, either on its own or relative to the country, from a policy and what we expect to be a policy standpoint? What was the message on Tuesday, Ms. Wolgemuth?
I think the voters, Evan, had a message to those whom they elected that said, stop spending the money and stop telling us what to do. I think that was the national mood, and it was certainly the mood here in Texas. I believe that they sent the legislators to Austin to balance the budget within available revenue, and I don't believe there's any way out of that. I think that it's a very strong message of limited government, less spending, less regulation, and thankfully for us, that's exactly what we stand for at Texas Public Policy Foundation.
You believe the idea that the governor has put forth almost from the beginning of this campaign that this was actually a national election?
I think all national, I do believe that all of the elections were national elections. And we saw a great deal of difference between Texas and California. Texas Public Policy Foundation just came out with an update to a study that we did, Texas versus California, on the economic front, pointing to the success that we have had in our state in being less affected by what's happening in the downturn in the economy, certainly than California and as well as most other states. But we saw the real difference on Tuesday as well. Texas became more conservative, California became more liberal.
Mr. Laney, do you believe Ms. Wolgemuth when she suggests that the Democrats who lost on Tuesday didn't actually lose, it was Barack Obama who lost in all those House districts?
I don't know whether it was that or the complacency about what was going on with...
Complacency.
Yeah. But I think it definitely was a national election. And whether it was him personally or the disdain for the politics of what's going on.
So your former colleagues in the House who lost on Tuesday really couldn't do much to save themselves in this kind of an environment?
I think they probably know how the Dallas Cowboys feel now.
Is that right? So the Democratic Party has a broken collarbone, or is that what I'm trying to understand? Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. This is a losing season.
This is a very losing season.
Yeah, it's just as simple as that. Is there a message for the party? Ms. Wolgemuth says that the message is stop spending our money and get out of our business. Would you say that that's the message that your colleagues, former colleagues in the party, in the legislature should take away from Tuesday as well?
I think probably the message will be that we'll see what money they want to take away, and we'll see where these individuals that were elected stand in representing their district and representing their constituency when the money starts being taken away. We'll see if they're still as animate about cutting as they were during the election cycle.
Campaigning is easier than governing.
Very definitely.
Very different. Mr. Castile, you've helped elect 2 people who had never served in political office before. Although I'm partial to lacrosse coaches, just personally. Will it be harder to coach a lacrosse team or harder to represent that district for your former client, Mr. Isaac?
Well, and that's what we've already told him, is that now the work begins. He's been working really hard for the past 10 months, every single day, campaigning, and now he actually has to get to work to do the real business that he was elected to do. And you know, anytime there's was it over 20 billion now, I think we're talking about with a shortfall. I mean, there's no choice but to cut. Where it's going to come from, you know, that's what they're elected to find out. But you know, the message is clear. You've got to cut spending. Unfortunately, in Texas, there's a constitution that says they have to balance the budget. So they're mandated to do it. So you know, they're going to have to cut spending. There's no other choice.
You represented very different. I referred to the range of people you represented on Tuesday. Was there a theme in those races as you viewed them from your consultant's perspective about what the message was?
It's all fiscal conservatism. I mean, it wasn't. You said it right away. It's cut taxes, stop spending. Can they do it? You know, that's what they're elected to go do, and they need to find a way to do it. If not, you know, it was just a few short years ago that Republicans were thrown out for overspending. So I think part of the message remains the same. The American people and Texas even more, they're fiscal conservatives, and they want to see government restraint. They want to see spending in check. And Republicans weren't doing that just a few short years ago. So we got thrown out, and Democrats were given a chance. And in just 2 short years, Democrats didn't understand that message.
An observation and a question, Mr. Castile. A lot was made of how this was an election in which people who were elected were going to take the country back. From whom? The Republicans are the majority in the House. The Republicans are the majority in the Senate. The Republicans have the governor's office. If you guys are mad about, and if your candidates who were successful on Tuesday were mad about the way that Texas is spending, aren't you mad at your own guys?
Well, it depends if you're looking at it from a party standpoint or a philosophical standpoint. Conservatism versus moderation or even liberalism, or to some of my good friends, Matt Glazer, progressivism. But no question, there were some Republicans who were not acting with fiscal restraint, and that aided, you know, a lot of the overspending. And I think the message has probably been received by, including all of them, that this session, you know, they better get that in order.
Mr. Dow, you had a tough day. You're a good sport to have to listen to that. That's why I put you at the end of the table, because you can't reach me. It was a tough day for you and for your folks, but in particular for the people who you've worked with, who were some of the more conservative members of the legislature, even though they may have been called liberals during the campaign. In fact, you represented some of the more conservative Democrats in the legislature. What does your party and what does that wing of the party take away from Tuesday as a message?
I think we're still where we always were. I agree with what Corbin and Ms. Wolgemuth have to say. People are angry at government. We're all angry at the same thing. We want to do very basic things. We want to keep us healthy, smart, and safe. And in this election, Republicans were better positioned to take advantage of that. Voters were angry. They weren't angry in the sense that, you know, I'm mad, I'm going to take you to court, good sir. They were angry in the sense that they were, you know, taking China off the wall and hurling it at our heads. And there was nothing to be done about it.
So in the case of, say, we knew that Representative Frost had a race. We knew that Representative Homer had a race. It was less clear that Representative McReynolds had a race, say. So in the case of the places where people got beat, who maybe all of us who presumed to know everything didn't expect, there's just nothing that could have done. The wave was indeed a tsunami, and it ran over everybody.
Sure. I don't think anyone disputes that, and I think that anybody, we're all right to try and learn lessons from it. We would be wrong, Republicans would be wrong to try and take too much credit for you know, oh, it's because we said this or we said that or we said this other thing. They have to govern now. They've always had to govern. And if 99 seats isn't ownership of the Texas House, I don't know what is.
Right,
so.
right. Any of you up here willing to say with a straight face that you predicted that the numbers in the Texas House would be as large as they were? Do you know anybody who, even the most optimistic optimists who predicted in the Republican side of things, who predicted that many?
The most I heard was 12 to 15, and we were being laughed at. I was in the 10 to 12 category, but yeah, I sniffed 15 one time and was put down for that.
Put down. Ms. Wolgemuth, you and I visited about this beforehand. Is it just that everything's bigger in Texas? I mean, is it as simple as the cliche? Everything's bigger in Texas, including our tsunamis? Is that what it is? What exactly happened here that made this? Because in fact, the gains that Republicans enjoyed in Texas were larger than gains that Republicans enjoyed in other states.
And I do believe that it's part of our DNA. We do things bigger and better, but we also have a fiercely independent spirit, and we don't like people telling us what to do. And I think that the national debate brought that home. Someone taking control of our health care was not received kindly in this state. And there were a number of issues, the overspending. We are a conservative state. Even before the 80s, when Republicans started taking over, we had two parties in this state. They were the conservative Democrats and they were the liberal Democrats. But we've always been a very conservative state. So I think that message that Tea Party people had across the nation and that you saw written about ad nauseum in the media was especially true of us in Texas because of our independent spirit.
Mr. Laney, when you were the Speaker of the Texas, if you were the Speaker of the Texas House today,
It'd be a disaster.
well, well, you'd be leading a majority of 51. But would you be resistant to having anything to do with Washington, the way is being advised of and was advised during the campaign of so many Democrats?
Well, I would hate to compare this period of time as at the same period of time that I served as Speaker, because it was different. We got along. We didn't.
You agree with that, Ms. Wolgemuth?
I'll give you an example.
I'll say that we got along better.
I'll give you an example. Under my tenure as Speaker, Arlene Wolgemuth became one of the 10 best. And you said she was I was to the left of her. It don't take much to be the left of Arlene. But I made it where somebody that was fighting me tooth and toenail every day, including knocking all my bills off the calendars, was able to make 10 best in Texas Monthly because she had an
So
opportunity.
you think the environment's different?
The environment's very different.
Right.
The environment's very different. When you've got individuals that say that you can't associate or you can't talk to another member of the House, you got a problem.
Yeah. But let me come back to the Washington thing. How much of is the Washington problem a problem going forward for members of your party, where basically any Texas Democrat who wants to still be employed in that way needs to put miles of distance between himself or herself and anything going on in Washington?
I think most Democrats always have, and the Republicans did a real good job of making it look like that Texas did.
Right. Barack Obama was suddenly the opponent in every House race that was conducted this year.
Billboards said, "Vote for me." Help me get rid of Obama.
Right. Right. Let me ask about the policies. Let's quickly move into the policy stuff. So, as I alluded to, the issues that were on the table already were the shortfall and redistricting, and then maybe as a third issue, immigration. Those were the big things that, regardless of the outcome on Tuesday, were going to be the things that the legislature was going to have to deal with. Let me ask each of you, let me start with Corbin, from the perspective of the people who you are worked with, and are working with. What does the message of Tuesday mean for, you alluded to a little bit of this, mean for the discussion of the shortfall? It is cut, cut, cut. Fiscal conservatism, that will mean cutting.
It's the only choice, and without raising taxes, which is...
Well, raising taxes is a choice. It's just not a choice anybody wants to embrace.
It's a choice. It's not a choice if they want to stay in office.
So you believe, Corbin, there will be no discussion whatsoever during the session of new revenue sources that could be considered taxes?
Well, there's still 51 Democrats, so there'll be plenty of discussion on it. But because there's so many Republicans in office now, there's 99, perhaps potentially one more, with respect, Representative, that still remains to be seen. So, which is a supermajority. So, but we were at 77 just a few days ago, which means several of those seats are going to be very difficult to hold on to in 2 years. So they're in a very precarious
A
situation.
special motivation not to talk about taxes.
That's right. And those are going to be, those, few, 15, 20 seats, the particular members, they're going to be under the gun more than others.
All four of you agree that taxes will not be on the table in a serious way during this discussion? You agree? You agree?
Why would the Democrats want to?
Well, they got to get to 25 billion or 20 billion or whatever. I mean, you can understand where somebody might say, well, it's not popular politically, but just from a we need money standpoint, you can see where somebody would say it, whether it's a good idea or not. But you think it's not going to be a discussion during the session?
I don't know why it would be.
Dow, you agree?
Republicans don't raise taxes, they raise fees. And this is true. This is true. No, they're not going to vote for taxes, they're going to vote for fees.
So you think there will be think there will be new revenue, just not called
Yeah.
no T word, but something else?
Well, we'll see. And local control's the other thing. You want your local control, you got it. You got local control of a horrible budget problem now. I think there's just going to be some passing of the buck. 20, 25 billion. If Republicans don't deal with that in a way that shows at least some heart, there are going to be electoral outcomes to that, the same as there would be to raising taxes or fees.
So Ms. Wolgemuth, what did the 99 Republicans in the House now do about the question of new revenue? Do they just say, we're going to go into this with the assumption that there's not going to be any? Or do they look for ways, to Mr. Dow's point, to find fees or to find other sources of revenue without necessarily resorting to taxes?
Well, we did this in 2003. It wasn't, depending on what the controller says the week before they come into session, we don't think that the 2003 budget cycle was quite as bad, but it does provide a roadmap for how to address this budget shortfall, and that starts with zero-based budgeting, that we look at every single thing, every single expenditure, every single program. It's an opportunity to get back to the core function of government and to fund only those things that are absolutely necessary. And that's where the rub will be. Some people will think one program is absolutely necessary and someone else will think that another is, but each program, each expenditure, each agency is going to have to justify its existence. And
Well, you're not going to go all Burka on us here and suggest eliminating the PUC and eliminating the Railroad Commission. You'll be off Barry Smitherman's Christmas card list if you do that.
we will be making some recommendations.
Will you recommend, will the Public Policy Foundation recommend the whole elimination of agencies?
We are looking at that, and we'll let you stay tuned to January.
Well, I'll be spying on you from across the street, I promise. Mr. Castile referred to $20 billion or even $25 billion. Do you believe, and do your colleagues believe, unlike the governor and unlike Senator Ogden, that the shortfall is in fact going to be that large?
We do not believe it's going to be that large, but we do believe it's going to be a very, very serious issue.
What's your best guess?
And oh, I don't have a guess. I look to Talmadge to tell me what our guess is.
Well, where is he here? Can I ask him? I guess not. But again, you're thinking cutting.
Oh, yes, cutting. And not just cutting for purposes of meeting the budget, but cutting for the purposes of, as I said, getting back to the core function of government and defining that, being able to say, so what if the government didn't fund this, then what would happen? And if there's a satisfactory answer that the world would not cave in, then we need to look seriously at not funding that any longer. Are there alternatives? Are there better ways to design systems? Are there better efficiencies that can be achieved? Looking across the board at which policies are causing our budget to increase and looking seriously at those policies. One of the things that we have found that is a real problem is we've been studying the budget from the outside and don't have LBB sitting in our corner, at our elbow as I did in 2003, is the lack of transparency in the budget. And I doubt that not only can the people of Texas not pick up the budget and understand what programs exist within that strategy, but I don't think most legislators can understand that as well. So we hope that one of the things that comes out of this is a redesign of the budget process itself so that people can see where the money is going and what it is being spent for.
Mr. Speaker, you have been in maybe not quite such a dire situation as leader, but you understand the challenges of having to tackle a problem as enormous as this on the budget side. If Speaker Strauss called you and said, give me a little advice here. I'm still relatively new at this. I've got to preside over a session that's going to be all about pain, and we've got to get all these guys, all 150 cats herded, or most of them at least, in the right direction. What do you say?
Well, first of all, it's he might use the same terminology that they did in Jaws when they saw that shark. Says, "I need a bigger boat," and his boat's going to need to balance. As much as Arlene would like to cut everything, there's some things that she would probably like to cut, and some of their recommendations will be passed on to the municipalities and to the local schools, which that's going to be interesting to see how they balance that when a lot of our discretionary money is for education.
Well, the two big areas, right, are going to be education and health and human services. That's really where the money is. Would you agree?
And
Would you
that's,
agree?
Oh, well, that's the biggest
and
part
that's
of our
decide
budget.
whether, you know, how much you want to pass back to the local school districts, the local municipalities, how many people you want to kick out of nursing homes, what you want to do.
Now, Ms. Wolgemuth, you've had some experience with this very specifically. In '03, you presided over the consolidation, I believe, of 12 agencies into 5.
That's correct.
And it was a several billion-dollar savings over the course of the life of this cut?
Yes.
So are there things that voluminous to cut now? Are there things that are left? Because if you're talking about 25, 20, even 15 billion, you're still talking about having to make pretty significant cuts.
And added to their dilemma for this next session is the fact that between Obamacare and the stimulus, their hands have been tied for many of the choices that they might like to otherwise make regarding Medicaid. So there are very few options on the Medicaid front, but are there programs within the Health and Human Services enterprise that are probably not absolutely necessary? And yes, we believe that there are. We talk a lot about education, and that the mantra is usually that education needs more money, but we published a study earlier this year that indicated that spending on education over the last 20 years, once you account for the inflation of the dollar, has increased 142%. The facility spending has increased 128%. We've had staff increases of 71%. So we have spent a lot more money. We have dedicated a lot more money in this state to education in both funding, in facilities, and in staff. So I think that there's room there. When you take a look at the reserves that some of the school districts have, it's quite significant. And so we need to look at ways to also reduce the burden on our local school districts. We need to look at, for example, charter schools, giving parental choice, taking the cap off of charters, which operate a little bit more efficiently than the traditional schools, but giving the traditional schools flexibility themselves to do things like distance or digital learning, take advantage of the technologies available today.
So, Mr. Castile, what Ms. Wolgemuth is suggesting indirectly and what the Speaker is suggesting directly is cost shifting. The possibility that what the state's going to do to get that number down is to say, okay, we're going to stop paying for this, and we're going to pass the cost of this down to school districts, hospital districts, cities and counties, and we're going to let them deal with it. And if they choose to raise taxes to provide these services, then it'll be on them. And if they choose to cut services, it'll be on them, and the state can go, you know, there goes that expense. Can your guys sell that downstream?
It's going to be a little bit of that. Consolidation of state government's definitely going to happen. It has to happen. You hear a lot of talk about, you know, TCQ and PUC being combined, and all sorts of ideas that have been talked about over the years. If they do shift to the county level, it better not be an unfunded mandate, or like we talked about earlier, they won't be in their new job.
In other words, you're saying that the state, which is to say the majority in the House, to which your members will have been elected, had better not offer an unfunded mandate to the counties that your members now represent? I mean, how do they, so 1 foot in one and 1 foot in another?
Well, it's precisely what they ran against. The voters saw Obamacare and the bailouts and all the stuff from Washington. They put that in the same basket as an unfunded mandate on states. And if the state is doing the same kind of thing to counties, they're going to face the same kind of pushback.
So your guys might well oppose the idea of shifting some of those costs as a way to reduce the budget downstream.
I think all legislators need to communicate very closely with their county elected officials and work with them on all of their business to ensure that they are not shifting responsibility to the county that they cannot bear.
Let the record show that Mr. Dow is smirking. Explain the smirk.
Well, talk to your local officials, see how they feel about it. I'm smirking about the as a Democrat. Ms. Wolgemuth's point earlier, I have no problem with government reorg. I mean, these are Republican agencies. I mean, we've for how many years now, Rick Perry's been appointing the heads of them, and it's not like the Texas Department of Insurance is serving the needs of insurance policyholders exceptionally well, or the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is doing a phenomenal job of protecting the environment. So from a standpoint of we're paying agencies to do I'm not sure what, and would we be better off with nothing? Maybe, I don't know, but it's going to be awfully fun to watch the Republicans figure all this out.
Well, and by fun you don't actually mean fun, because the fact is that the remaining members of the Texas 20-pack, Texas 20-pack, and the remaining Democrats in the House are going to themselves be in a position of having to either oppose these cuts or to go back home and sell exactly what you're describing downstream
you're right.
to their constituents.
And it breaks my heart, and I don't mean to stand up here or sit up here and be glib about this. We're going to see terrible stuff happen. If Democrats were in charge of this legislature, we would see terrible things happen. It's right. This is a crisis.
There's a little bit, Ms. Wolgemuth, of the "you broke it, you bought it" thing, right? So you want to take more control of a situation that is difficult. In some ways, you kind of wonder who would want to run government at a time like this.
I would wonder that as well.
You must be very happy to be on the outside.
I am indeed.
Looking
I am
in.
indeed.
Yeah.
But I would like to correct something. We certainly don't advocate pushing the funding down to the local level. We believe that government at all levels needs to they need to be setting priorities for where they're going to spend the available revenue. And if the legislature attempts to push things down, that will be a tax increase in and of itself.
Well, you referred to the reserves that school districts have. In fact, they've almost got rainy day funds of their own. We haven't talked about the big rainy day fund, but you would advocate, or the Public Policy Foundation would advocate, for the state reducing its share of support to local authorities and asking those authorities to dip into their own reserves potentially to...
We would advocate systemic changes that don't require them to spend as much money.
Mm-hmm. So you would say cut across the board, statewide, local as well.
Correct. Find better ways, like the one that I pointed to on charter schools, and they operate at a lesser cost. They are still public schools, but they operate at a lesser cost.
Mr. Speaker, am I correct that the procedural deal with the rainy day fund is it will require a 2/3 vote of both houses to dip into it?
That's what I understand.
Do you believe that the legislature will, facing the shortfall of whatever size it is, whether it's the Perry-Ogden-Wolgemuth version, which is not as much as the Castile-Strauss-Pitts version, whatever the range is, that the rainy day fund is going to be drained to solve this problem?
Well, they didn't have any problem draining it before, and so, but now, depending on what the individuals that were elected said in their campaigns about spending, because there's going to have to be an emergency appropriation immediately to finish out this year, which will add to the total. Add to the total. So there'll be some individuals that look at their whole card pretty deep this time in when they cast votes to do things like that, because it will it will take a 2/3 vote.
Mr. Speaker, would you drain the rainy day fund if you were in the legislature now? Take all of it out?
I'd like to think we wouldn't have gotten the shape we're in if I was
Well,
still
but
there.
Mr. Speaker, that may work on the farm, but it doesn't work with me. Would you drain the rainy day fund if you were in the legislature?
I would have it on the table as an option.
As an would you have draining the whole thing as an option or just part of it?
Well, depending on the individual members and how they reacted to solving the problem.
Mr. Castile, for or against draining the rainy day fund?
Well, it is raining.
Some would say it's pouring. So you're inclined to think that's a good thing?
I think you're going to have to tap a good bit of it, absolutely, if not all of it.
Mr. Dow?
We have a structural budget deficit that's not going to be fully addressed by this legislature. And with that in mind, the state's not going to be any better off 4 years from now. We're still going to have another budget crisis on our hands. So it's hard to imagine draining the whole thing right now whenever we're still staring down the barrel.
Even if not
very
draining the
long
whole thing meant more cuts, you would still be hedging your bets on draining the whole thing?
I'd hedge my bets.
Ms. Wolgemuth, what would you say? They come back to you and they ask for your wisdom. What do you tell them?
After they have done everything else conceivably possible, turn to no more than half of the rainy day fund. If we keep about half of it, that'll be about 5% of our general revenue, and that keeps our bond rating at its highest, which means that the money that we have to borrow for the bonded indebtedness that the voters have authorized would be at the lowest rate. So that gives us an advantage in our budget process of spending less money in and of itself. Not only the bond rating, but just the safety of still having money. Who knows when this economy is going to turn around?
So you might go for some of it, but not all of it.
No more than half of it.
The President of the United States picks up the phone tomorrow and says, you know what? I know I've been hating on Texas for the last 2 years, but I'm going to now reverse course. I am going to provide you an additional federal stimulus in the amount of your budget shortfall to avoid cuts to social services programs in Texas. What do you do?
Are you asking me?
I am.
We have a study that shows that the more federal money that is spent, the more damage there is to the economy. So we would advocate not accepting the stimulus money.
Would you have turned down the nearly $17 billion that the state accepted in the last 2 cycles to balance the budgets in 07 and 09?
I can't answer that question.
Why? Why not?
Because I was not involved in that part of the process, at that time in the process, and I don't know where all the money went still. Even though we've had studies on it, I don't know where all it went.
Even though the standard line is that 12 billion of the 17 billion went to balance the budget shortfall in the last session, and the remaining 5 went to balance retroactively the budget shortfall in 07. You still have questions as to where that money went.
I still have questions as to where that money actually went, but the principle is that the more federal money we take, the worse it is on our economy. It's taking money in the short term with a long-term detriment.
Let me move into redistricting. Mr. Speaker, is there any way that redistricting this time is going to go any better than it went for your side last time?
I wouldn't foresee any. I don't see a shiny outcome.
And did Tuesday make that worse?
Oh, very definitely. But the problem now you've got is that you've got many members of the same party that are going to be fighting for lines among themselves, which is going to create a little hardship on the presiding officer.
This is to Mr. Castile's point of earlier that the way you get from 77 to 99 is by electing some people who are going to automatically be at risk next time and who are going to have a particular interest in the outcome of redistricting. You agree with that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Mr. Laney, you agree with that point as well?
Sure.
You both do?
And I think the biggest fights in this redistricting program are going to be inter-party fights.
Republican and Republican.
Republican.
Right. Mr. Castile, what does the difference between 99 and 77 mean from a practical standpoint on redistricting?
It means we're one vote away for not having to worry about what the other side wants.
It's a great country, isn't it?
It is a great country. It's a great state. It's a great state. Redistricting is, I don't see how it could possibly be as contentious as it was last time. We're going to get probably 4 more seats.
So you believe that a House with an 88 vote majority for the Republicans, an 88 seat majority, is likely to be more contentious from the Democrats' perspectives than a House with a 99? The 99 are going to treat the Democrats differently than the 88 did?
Well, I think a 77, 73 would be a lot more contentious, yes. 88, you're starting to get, we're in rarefied air here. We've never been here before, so, no one knows what it's going to be like. What's the most we've ever had before of a majority? 90?
88, I believe. It wasn't Craddock the high watermark, right? Yeah.
I don't think anyone has any idea what's going to happen. But all we know is there's going to be 4 more seats, probably 4 more seats. Probably one in the Metroplex, probably one in Houston, one in the Austin-San Antonio corridor, perhaps one in the Valley. And with 99 Republicans, that probably means at least 3 Republican seats.
Mr. Dow?
I still don't totally know what to make of everything that's come out of this election. The only thing that was exactly clear to me on election night when the Republicans elected 99 to the House is that one of the major questions got answered. There was this raging debate, are the Republicans going to draw a map that they can defend and have 83 Republicans in it, or a crazy map and have 88 Republican seats? Well, now they've got 99 people that they've got to shoehorn somehow into, assume that before this is all said and done, there are 3 Republican freshmen who don't sign pledge cards to Strauss. So, now they got 96 districts to draw, and they can't do it. And that's frankly, that's a good thing for the Democrats.
Department of Justice is not going to allow a crazy map. That's what it's there for. That's what HAVA's for. So,
would you like to look at my district from that you helped draw in 2001?
I didn't help draw it.
And see if the Department of Justice and one of my fraternity brothers was on the federal court that approved it.
Boy, if you couldn't count on him, right?
That's exactly right.
Ms. Wolgemuth, much is made now of the fact that this is the first time since the Voting Rights Act that decennial redistricting will happen with a Democrat in the White House and a Democratic Justice Department. What about that? What about that as an element in all this?
Well, fortunately for me, Texas Public Policy Foundation doesn't handle redistricting policy.
Well, I put you close to me so I could lean forward, as they say on cable, and ask you again. Come on. What do you think? Really, in all seriousness, you have no opinion about this? You must have an opinion about this.
I have a personal opinion about this.
I'd like to hear that.
I think that it'll be a very interesting redistricting session.
Well, that's not an opinion. Do you believe that 99 means that the Republicans can do whatever they want and the Democrats have to stick it in their ear?
I think that the Voting Rights Act keeps either party from doing everything that they might want to do. I think there are very tight regulations on what is doable in both the congressional, and we do have some state laws on that as well. So it will be very interesting.
Do you share Mr. Castile's position that the Republicans, given the fact that they have 99 members, are right to believe that they're entitled to 3 of those 4 seats?
Do you recall that in the Senate they have the rule of 21? I think that...
Except when they don't.
Except when they don't, right. Which is very, very rare.
Very rare, right.
But I think that bipartisanship in the Senate will come to play in the redistricting battle.
So you're not necessarily thinking it should be 3 based on the gains that the Republicans have made?
That it should be what?
3 Republican congressional seats as opposed to, say, a division of 2 and 2.
Truly, I don't have an opinion on that because I haven't looked at the numbers.
Mr. Dow, Mr. Laney, will your guys consider New Mexico or Oklahoma as an alternative this time? Any reason to think that's the case?
I wouldn't think so.
Mr. Dow? No? So they'll stay here? Should I ask Mr. Pena? Should I ask other people in the audience if they have plans? To what degree as I want to not rob from the question period too much, to what degree will immigration be a big issue in play during this session, Ms. Wolgemuth?
Well, obviously, immigration, as you said earlier in your opening remarks, it was one of the issues that was on the table before this election began. We feel that the proper role of the federal government and the state government needs to be adhered to, but one of the roles of the state government is public safety, and we have a real crime problem on the border, and we definitely think that the crime issue needs to be handled, and handled largely by the state of Texas.
So we're looking at, as people are surmising, some version of the Arizona immigration law being a discussion point in the legislation this time, do you think?
Well, we've already had a couple of people say that they're going to file it, so I
Mr.
assume
Berman,
that
Ms.
they-
Riddle, and perhaps some others are going to be behind that. We'll have voter ID back again. 99 means that voter ID will be back again, you think?
I would imagine.
Yeah. Mr. Castile, what else do you think?
I think voter ID will definitely be back. And, immigration, it has to come up, but I hope it comes up in a constructive manner as it being an economic issue, rather than a more of a social issue, healthcare system, education system, the strain that illegal immigration puts upon our economy. I hope it stays in that context because it's such an emotional, fiery issue, and it can quickly divide, even Republicans on it. And I think it's going to have a little bit different turn because of what happened on Tuesday night, and that there were several new Hispanics elected who are Republicans.
By my count of the new faces in the legislature, there are 4 Hispanic Republicans,
Well,
is that right?
6 if you count DeMargo and John Frullo. And DeMargo's, I believe, grandfather was from Mexico, I believe. And I'm not sure about Mr. Frullo, but I'm told he has Hispanic heritage as well. So, plus 2 African Americans, but all Republicans. And if you count the 2 new members of Congress, both Republicans, both Hispanic. So that's only a good thing for Texas, obviously for the party, but obviously for Texas as well. But I think that that's going to bring an interesting dynamic to the immigration debate, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Mr. Dow, what is the Democratic Party, what's left of the Democrats in the House, what do they do on this issue with 99 Republicans who may now view Tuesday as a mandate to push for a more hardline policy either from a border security standpoint, as Ms. Wolgemuth says, or from an economic policy standpoint, as Mr. Castile says?
First, let me say that Democrats, there's never been any dispute from us that this is about keeping people safe is something that we take seriously, and especially along the border, that's never been in dispute. We're going to get beat. There's just no two ways about it.
Beat on voter ID?
No. Yeah, we're going to get beat on everything on immigration. I mean, how does that? I don't know how that doesn't happen.
It's a math problem at this point.
It's just it's arithmetic. You're right. And now what I don't understand is if this is such a big deal, why didn't it get fixed whenever Tom Craddock had 88 Republicans in 2003? I mean, but here we are today, and they're going to get another bite at the apple, and I think they're going to take the bite this time.
Mr. Laney, what do you think about that?
Well, you got to go back and look. There wasn't very many years ago that initiative and referendum was the big deal for campaign purposes. Term limits were campaign. Once the individuals that were for that got into office, you never heard it again. I'm waiting to see how much of this that comes to the surface that that the individuals have campaigned on. Potentially, as you all have said, 100 votes. I think the House can pass any constitutional amendment they want to.
Right.
That creates initiative and referendum, term limits, anything else.
So you actually think that some of the stuff that came up during the campaigns, and immigration was obviously a theme in many of these campaigns, may actually not show back up?
It may show up, but to what extent? I think you'll see. I think you'll see a lot of individuals that do what they're elected to do, and that's represent their district. May find some of the other things higher on their constituents list than some of the things that they campaigned on.
If you were advising Democrats on how to proceed on this issue, do you agree with Mr. Dow? Basically, hope is lost. You're going to get beat on this issue.
I think they're capable of the individuals that ran on these things are capable of passing nearly anything they want to pass. Now, whether it becomes law or not is a different story. But with the majority that they've got, nearly anything can pass.
So would you advise the Democrats to take a more conciliatory position on this and other issues and say, look, you got us. We know you got us. And so rather than fight you tooth and nail, or tooth and toenail, as you said earlier, I like that expression, we're going to actually go into this thinking we know we're going to lose, so we're going to try to cut the best deal we can going in the door, as opposed to going to Ardmore.
I think regardless of what the situation is in the legislative process, you try to do the best you can for your constituents, to cut the best deal you can, and get a little piece of the pie is a lot better than all of the pie.
Well, a little piece is also better than none.
Right.
Right. Okay. Before we move over to questions from everybody here, I want to ask each of you to talk about an issue other than the shortfall, other than redistricting, other than immigration, that you think will now be in play as a result of Tuesday. Ms. Wolgemuth first. What do you think?
Goodness, there are so many things that I would
Well, I won't limit you to one. How about that? I won't limit you to one.
Well, one of the things that's kind of unfinished business, in our opinion, is what to do about the Kelo decision and passing adequate eminent domain protection laws. So that's one.
And do you think that's any more likely to be on the table because of the size of the Republican majority?
I do.
You do? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Another measure that we've been trying to get passed in my area is health savings accounts for state employees. Been very successful in Indiana, both popular with the state employees and cost savings to the state itself. I've already mentioned charter schools. Taking the cap off charter schools.
Charter schools, you think that may be something that comes up. How about any social issue stuff that, you know, the last couple sessions have been taken up by a lot of things. Voter ID, you could argue, is a social issue on some levels, but are we going to see any social issues that have not popped up in previous sessions simply because the numbers didn't permit it to happen?
Well, again, just as we were in redistricting, Texas Public Policy Foundation doesn't
You don't
address.
play
we
with
don't
that
play
stuff.
in that field.
All right. Mr. Laney, what do you think are the issues likeliest to come up that had not been on the agenda before Tuesday but might now be on?
I quit predicting what the legislature would do in 1973, about 30 minutes after I was elected, or was sworn in. I think that the potential for having a governor that's running for president.
Well, you've actually experienced that before, haven't you?
I have.
You were speaker during a session that preceded immediately a presidential campaign.
And I can tell you that there is a lot of pressure on the legislature to do things and not do things from a presidential candidate.
And how would you characterize this legislature as more inclined rather than less inclined to be, more inclined this time than it was in '99 to essentially be unpaid campaign staffers for a peri-presidential effort?
I can't answer that. I wouldn't know how to read those people. But
Did you consider yourselves to be part of the Bush Army in '99?
No, but I think we weren't trying to do damage to his candidacy through the legislative process. Weren't necessarily promoting it, but he did take a promotion in that he took credit for the tax relief bill that passed. But the legislature will have to produce some real results from some of the campaign promises that were made. And for a candidate to be running nationally will have to produce some results
And
on
is
a
there-
local level.
Is there one issue that comes to mind?
No. But I think that that individual, if they're running for a national office, will either have to take credit for something or find somebody to blame for something not happening. So there's 99 people in the House and several senators to blame.
Mr. Castile, what do you think is an issue or two issues that might come up that had not been on the agenda before Tuesday?
Probably tuition deregulation.
Or re-regulation as it happens, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, 03, I believe.
Is that an issue to run on?
Not if you want to move voters, but it depends on your district. Tuition and race that I ran with an HT 45, Texas State tuition went up 98% since 2003, and fees went up 61%. So I think especially in some of the districts where.
So Mr. Isaac is for re-regulation of tuition?
I think he is. Yeah. But I'm not totally sure, but I do know that he knows that there's a problem there and it needs to be looked at in some form. So I think that may come up.
So you think that comes up, and it comes up in the context of the budget debate?
Everything is going to come up in the context of the budget debate, but including teacher pay raises as well. So,
Mr. Dow, what do you say?
Well, I wish Mr. Isaac a lot of luck in this session, re-regulating tuition first.
I didn't say he supported it. I said he's recognized there's a problem there.
He said we don't know whether he's
if there's nearly 100% increase in 7 years in tuition, then something's wrong.
I recognize the problem. There's just not money to fix it. I think that just a quick hit, I'm sure that the tort reformers are dusting off their old files from 2003. Like, what's the craziest thing we can come up with? And they're going to have to make a go at something like that because they've got a lot of money invested. They need something to show for it now. The bigger question that I have is bipartisanship dead in this legislature? I have a lot of respect for Corbin and what he's accomplished in this election, but he said something earlier that scared me. It's that there are now almost 100 Republicans and they can do anything they want. Well, when Speaker Laney, what was the largest majority you ever had?
I think 4.
4. Okay. Well,
it's a hell of a lot easier to be bipartisan when your majority is 4, isn't it?
Yeah, but it didn't change the fact that if a Republican had a good idea, it was a good idea. And
well, let's not forget it was just 2 years ago that the Republicans couldn't even come up to a consensus on their own speaker. So let's not act like it's a 99 vote block, because that's not what we have here. So.
Well, and on that question, before we begin, recognizing that I have to exempt Ms. Wolgemuth from this conversation since her daughter is the spokesperson for Representative Chisholm, let me ask the other, and I promised you I'd do that, let me ask the other people on this program, is there going to be a speaker's race, and who's the next speaker going to be? Speaker Laney?
Well, I think there's a speaker's race because I saw both of them on television last night saying there was one. and everything
So you're blaming the media?
Everything you read in the media is correct, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And I think you even had it on the Texas Tribune.
Well, we probably did.
That did, and so there is a race. And I'm sure that the list that was released by the sitting speaker that shows him with 122 votes is probably correct.
Now he says 130?
130 is probably correct. I'm also sure that there's some on that who have pledged both sides.
Well, we've had one, Mr. Zedler, Representative-elect Zedler has already said, I'm not supposed to be on that list.
And I think that there's probably some that didn't think it would be published too, that probably are on both sides.
Mr. Laney, I suspect you've seen this movie before.
I have seen this movie before, and I can assure you that if I can ever find those pledge cards that I lost, I will show somebody sometime.
Right, but do you believe that Speaker Strauss will be the next speaker?
At this point in time, it appears that way.
Do you believe the person who-
But there's also several days between now and the second Tuesday in January.
That's true. Do you believe that the person who Speaker Strauss defeats, if he were to be reelected, will be Representative Chisholm, or someone who, you know, as they said in Godfather 3, our enemy has not yet revealed himself? Is that?
As I say, I wouldn't predict anything that the legislative process might produce.
Yeah, don't know. Mr. Castile, will Mr. Isaac and Mr. Anderson support Speaker Strauss?
I haven't asked them, but I do think there's a race, and I do think Strauss will still be the speaker.
Do you believe that Strauss will ultimately defeat Mr. Chisholm or somebody else?
Well, as I recall, 2 years ago, no one was even predicting that Strauss would be the speaker. We were talking about 2 or 3 others.
So we should
4 or
all
5
be
of them.
hovering around Tarrytown waiting for the location of the, this time? Is that what it is? But you believe it'll be Strauss?
I do.
Mr. Dow?
It's hard to-
Mr. Chisholm has noted that Mr. Strauss was elected with the support of Democrats last time, which is a bad thing apparently. And so tell me, who are the Democrats going to support this time?
According to Strauss's pledge list, Strauss, it's hard for me to imagine overseeing the largest Republican gain in Texas history and then getting thrown out. But yeah.
Okay, game show speed round. Last question. Is Rick Perry running for president?
Oh, heavens, I don't know.
Would you like him to?
I will say that I think he's done a very good job as governor.
You're very good. Mr. Speaker?
I don't think there's any question about him that he's running for president, or running for vice president, or running for something.
Running for something. Running on Monday, at least, to Jon Stewart is where he's running to. Mr. Castile?
I think Governor Perry would be a great president.
You think he's running?
I don't know. No idea.
Mr. Dow?
I would if I were him,
You would if you were Governor Perry. Because?
because he looks awfully good for it right now. I'm not for me personally, but he's got a
Looks good on you, right?
yeah. But he's got the platform to jump off of, and you know the other thing that there's this weird new space in American politics that Sarah Palin has created, and that is you go off and the loony sphere and make a ton of money talking about whatever you want to talk about, and Perry could do that. I mean, he could just want to make himself rich, so and not have to answer to American voters. So
I think the wheels are coming off. What do you say? We might go to questions.
Local school districts can consolidate all they want to under present law.
They don't need help.
They can do it under existing circumstances. Just that Friday night makes a lot of difference in where you want your school.
It does do that, sir. Well, I think casino gambling died a painless death on Tuesday, did it not? Would you all agree that casino gambling may be one of the casualties of the Tuesday elections?
I think it'll still come up.
You do?
I think it's going to have a more difficult time.
Ms. Wolgemuth, what do you think about casino gambling? Let's do the second one first. What do you think about casino gambling?
Well, we're not in favor of any new revenue.
Even non-tax revenue.
We don't think that gambling is a very
Do you have a
efficient
Coke
way to
machine in your
tax.
office? I mean, I'm actually wondering, how far down does this...
No, but you know, that's a consideration.
Yeah. So seriously, no casino gambling. You're opposed to it, and you don't think it will be a big
We
issue.
do not, again, we don't have a position on gambling. What we do have a position on is no new revenue. So if that were the premise upon which the debate was held, we would not be in favor of new revenue. We think the state needs to live within the available revenue.
What about the idea of consolidating school districts? Anybody want to take a whack at that?
I think the speaker answered that fairly well, and I haven't studied it in a while, but I believe when I was in the House, there was not only the permission to consolidate, but there was actually an incentive. isn't there?
Incentives to consolidate, and you know, that's going right the opposite of what all of these individuals were elected on local control. I mean, you have 100% local control on consolidation of your local school districts, and if you want to do it locally, that's it's your business. You have an incentive to do it. But also, there's not necessarily a cost per child. The cost per child on educating kids, there's a point that it's not. It becomes a revenue, a cost factor rather than a saving factor on the size of schools.
When you consolidate, yeah, at a certain point.
I think Jason should have first crack at that, or not Jason. Jason Isaac's spokesman, who's stood accused of it.
Well, Mr. Castile, what would we pick on Jason Isaac just because he's
are picking
physically
on Jason
close?
a lot.
Well, Jason and Rodney, what would your new members of the legislature who you helped elect, what would they say about those two issues?
It was
Property
taxes.
property tax elimination and replaced with another source, and which I suspect Ms. Wolgemuth is for the first and maybe not for the second. Get rid of it, but maybe not. We'll come and ask you in a second about whether you would replace it. But private school vouchers.
I think vouchers will probably come back up. School choice, whatever you want, whatever issue you want to call it. Doing away with the property tax and replacing, that obviously came up in the HT 45 race quite a bit. You may have seen it on television. The principle behind it obviously is you never currently own your own home if you're paying property taxes on it every year. So the hardcore fiscal conservative says we do away with property taxes so we can truly own our own home. That's where are you going to make up that revenue, and that's the challenge. So I don't see that as a viable option coming up, at least not this session. The most common place to make it up is the sales tax, and of course you hear about hiking up the sales tax. Anything above TPPF policy, I believe, said 9.5% starts to you actually start to lose revenue. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it was somewhere in that area. So we're already at 8.25 or 8 somewhere around there. So we don't have much room to grow there if we are going to grow it at all, which is a tax shift at best. So no, I don't see that coming up, but I do see vouchers coming up. More of I guess it's in the social world that we were talking about of issues that come up.
Ms. Wolgemuth, what about this question of eliminating the property tax but replacing it with something else?
We are strong proponents of eliminating the property tax and replacing it with a sales tax. With that caveat, I will say that this legislature is going to have such big issues that I don't know if they have the bandwidth to do everything that they're going to be required to do and change the tax system as well, although we would be standing on the sidelines cheering that. Because of the tax shift to the property owners, it has become an economic problem in our state that we are going to have to address in the short term or the long term. And as far as the school vouchers are concerned, we are in favor of anything that's going to increase parental choice, bring competition back into the play, and that competition may be between school districts. It may be with online digital or other forms of digital learning. It might be, as I've said, with charter schools. There are any number of options that we would see as a benefit to improving the outcomes in education and reducing the cost.
Mr. Laney, Mr. Dow, either of you think the Democrats are going to be able to stop vouchers if they come up?
I think it's going to. I don't know. I don't have any idea that the explanation can offset the energy that has been behind subsidizing private schools.
Mr. Dow?
I'm pretty fatalistic. I think the Republicans can do whatever crazy thing they want to do right now, and they just have to do all this, keeping in mind that there's going to be another election 2 years from now. And what do they think?
And so you think that the only check on the Republicans' instincts from a policy standpoint may be that next election?
The next primary election, really, that's going to be fascinating. The next Republican primary. It's your majority.
There is something from a metaphor standpoint about this, isn't there, actually? Well, the waste is now your waste. What about, but I guess that's a source of revenue potentially, right?
Well, it is, I mean, we do have to be careful, but I think that we have more than adequate environmental laws to protect our water bodies, and it is incumbent upon the state of Texas to protect those water sources and to protect the citizens, but I think that we have more than enough regulations to accomplish that.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting question, you know, which is the degree to which these gains are just illusory, you know, that 2 years from now,
It'll depend on what happens in redistricting.
pendulum swings back a little bit. And you think, Speaker, that it's, it's ultimately about that?
The districts are going to be completely different. They were completely different in, most of them were completely different in 2001 and after that redistricting, and I think there'll be some that'll still be recognizable, but there'll be a lot of them that'll be changed completely.
What do you think about that, ma'am? Do you think that the 99 will be a reasonably safe number from the standpoint of these district lines changing, or?
Well, I will answer that in relation to what I said in the beginning.
Right.
The message from the people of this state was stop spending the money and stop telling us how to run our lives. And so it's not just about redistricting, it's about the success that this body will have in accomplishing that mandate that I believe they've been given.
And that actually gets to Jim's point, which is that people who are elected to honor that mandate and then don't put themselves at risk of being defeated not only in a Democratic contest against a Democratic general election, but there may be primary challenges, in fact, to those people.
That's true.
So anybody who gets elected in this kind of an environment knows he or she has to stick with the agenda.
And because it was a national election that we discussed earlier, it will depend on what's happening in the country as well.
Right. Hard to imagine a worse environment for Democrats than this year. Well, you might imagine it, actually. I was speaking of the broader. Okay.
We want to empower parents. That is our ultimate goal. We want parents to be making those choices. We want parents to have the ability to hold accountable the education system wherever they choose to have their child educated, whether that's in a public school, a private school, a public charter school, homeschooling, online learning. We want the parents making those kinds of choices. So we want the money to follow the child and for the parents to be the ones who determine that. You know, we are consumers every day of different products. Why do we think that we are capable of selecting our cell phone, capable of selecting the home that we own, capable of deciding what job we're going to have, capable of deciding whether or not we're going to get a college education, but we can't decide how to educate our own children?
Anybody else want to get on it?
Charter schools work. I mean, KIPP Academy is a perfect example. And, you know, and I think I've seen a similar study, and part of that was not taking into account of that was the quality of the education that the child went to from where they were. And it is a parental rights issue. If the parents don't want their kids in a school for a certain reason, perhaps it's a safety issue, perhaps they don't feel like they're getting the education they need, they should be able to take their kid to where they want to go, and not just because they're a family of means to go to a private school. But I mean, the argument is, I'm not sure there is an argument. I mean, charter schools work. It's a better education for the kids, and it's a choice for the parents to take their kids where they want them to go to school.
The economy in this nation is bad, and because of the choices that have been made in 2003, and we have a study that I referred to earlier that documents that, the choices to remain a low-tax state have put Texas in a better position. Does that mean that we're in a good position? No. No state in this union is in a good position. We're having a national downturn in the economy. But Texas, because of the choices that we have made to be a low-tax, low-regulatory state, has found itself in a far better position. And we will address this. I believe that this legislature will choose to address this current shortfall in the same way that was done before, by keeping taxes low, by keeping regulations low, and providing Texans with opportunities to be prosperous in the future.
Mr. Laney, I think this is actually a good question, frankly, for the end here. So let's let everybody address it, and then we'll wrap. Mr. Laney, what about that?
Well, I think
Try to restrain yourself.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a the increase in the budget from 93 to now has been nearly $70–80 billion. So, you know, they have there hadn't been hadn't been constraints for the last several years on spending. I think that these individuals are going to come and look and see what, as they go through the legislative process, to hopefully see what their constituents need, desires, and wants, and then make some good judgment decisions. Now, if they make political decisions, like Jim has said, they probably won't be back next time. If they make good judgment decisions and can go home and explain how they voted and why they voted, regardless of the different groups that say we don't want any kind of new income revenue at all, you're going to have to make some hard decisions on which ones to cut. And there's was a lot of campaign rhetoric during the campaign, how good Texas was doing and how positive Texas was. We're going to see now if they can bring that positive note to the legislative process.
Mr. Castile?
Well, again, in 2006 and 2008, because of those elections, there's a graveyard of former elected officials who are Republican, who were overspending. And the voters decided to give Democrats a chance. And that's more in Washington than in Texas, but they definitely tightened up the Texas House to a one-seat majority. Again, this was a national election, so it's more Washington focused. But the Democrats did not get that message in 06 and 08. And they passed all these stimulus and spending bills and health care bills. And I think the voters have spoken pretty clearly. And is it going to be any better? We'll find out. But if this new crop of legislators hears the message that, I don't know how you can't hear that message that was delivered on Tuesday, then I think it probably should be better. And I mean, it's been a consistent message the past 3 election cycles. Republicans have their chance once again, and we'll see how they do with it.
Mr. Dow, final remark.
Necessity is the mother of invention. You're going to see a lot of bad inventions. To be fair, we'll probably a few good things will probably happen to streamline state government. I still do work for a few Democrats who believe in doing that. You're going to see a lot of budget gimmicks. You're going to see a lot of fees. I think that you won't see casino gaming, but you really might see some form of gaming because they have to find revenue somewhere, and 2 more years from now, I think you'll see another big budget deficit because this legislature, I frankly just don't believe has the capacity to address the real structural deficit that we face.
Well, in 2 more years, hopefully, we'll get all 4 of you back. And then we'll talk about this again. Please, thank you for coming. Thank our panel, Arlene Wolgemuth, Pete Laney, Corbin Castile, and Jim Dow.